Hello. This is the long delayed Facebook Live session where I'm here to answer some of your questions about child's sleep. Thank you so much for all the questions you guys have submitted, and I'm going to be posting a replay of this as well, and eventually something in my blog with links we're talking about. Now, just a few things. Legally speaking, this is just information. It is not medical advice about your child. I'm not your child's doctor. Now that we've got that out of the way, I'm going to show I have a very appropriate t-shirt. I tired. There's a nap for that. Boom. Given to me by my nurse practitioner, Monica Ordway, who's doing some really cool sleep research right now. So let's get to it. I'm going to start with a question by Amanda. What should you do very specifically about frequent toddler night wakings? Besides quick check-ins and no removing from the crib, how can you manage longer sleep stretches? If you answer this, he is still waking at night, but now in a bed, climbing from crib. Needs a bottle to lay with and to go back to sleep, or it's an hour plus of crying, and I just don't have the energy in the middle of the night. Well, Amanda, I hear you, and this is a really common problem. Let me just show you guys a few quick pictures that explain what we're talking about here. So essentially, this is what a normal night of sleep should look like. So from bedtime to wake time. And your child goes through different stages of sleep. If your child's falling asleep on his or her own, she'll go through a long stretch of sleep, anywhere from 1 to 3 hours. In this early evening period of sleep, this is where if your child falls asleep in the car, you can pick your child up, carry them to their bedroom, and they fall asleep. Then about 2 to 3 hours in, they have their first REM period. And REM sleep is a lot like awake sleep. It's easy to wake up from REM sleep. And in fact, it's really common. And this red bar is essentially just what a nighttime awakening. Generally, if we know how to put ourselves to sleep, we can just roll over and go back to sleep. Maybe you adjust your pillows, you don't remember it in the morning. However, if your child needs you to fall asleep, it's very different. You hold your child, you give him a bottle, he falls asleep, you try to relax for a few hours, and then all of a sudden, you're getting into bed 2 hours later, and he wakes up. Then, you need to repeat bedtime again. In the next REM period, you're going to do it again, and again, and eventually, you're awake for the day. So really, this feels like a middle of the night problem because the middle of the night is really painful. Sorry. Software is a little bit janky here. But what it is the bedtime problem. And really what you need to work on is getting your child to fall asleep independently. In Amanda's situation, if your child is in a bed, it's a little bit different. I really don't think that cried out approach is particularly feasible or advisable in a child who's sleeping in a crib. It's difficult to institute, and older children, I just think it's too painful. Doing something with a mixture of a later bedtime and slowly withdrawing yourself from bedtime, what is on my website is a camp it out approach. And I want to say I didn't come up with the term. The term came from Harriet Hiscock in Australia. But I would really work on getting your child to fall asleep independently at night, and the nighttime awakenings should extinguish with time. Really, don't beat yourself up and don't feel like you have to solve problems in the middle of the night. Just do what you're doing to survive and work on getting your child to fall asleep independently. So, Lindsay has a question. Actually, two questions. The first is how to manage different sleep needs for two siblings who share a room and like to keep each other up. I have a 2.5-year-old who naps about 90 minutes per day, and no matter what, we won't sleep until between 8:30 and 8. He won't sleep between 8:30 and 8:45. We wait till he's down to put his older brother, a 6.5-year-old brother, into bed, because if we don't, it's a circus show of mutual shenanigans. But the older kid is really tired in the morning from going to bed that late. Well, Lindsay, I feel you because I have 2 boys, and it can be kind of a disaster sometimes if they get going. And that geographical split can be critical. to allowing you to succeed. Now, not everybody has the luxury of a room for each of their children, or alternatively, how maybe your kids want to room together for whatever reason. I think there's a couple of solutions. One is you could actually try to put the older child down earlier. Now that's a tough sell because it is very unjust to a 6.5-year-old to go to bed before the brother or sister. Sometimes a bribe, I'm not talking something big, can be very helpful to get the child in and settled. The other thing you could do is try to move the younger child's nap a little bit earlier in the day. The final thing you could do is see if you can take some measures to get them to sleep in a little bit later. It's a tough sell, again, because little kids get up earlier, but making sure the room is dark, really, really dark, so the light from the outside is not waking them up, can be helpful. And also, depending on who your early riser is, the 6-year-old especially, asking them to come and get you first. Now, a question here from Jen from Food Allergy Buzz, which is a great site which you should totally check out. Wondering if you have any advice about how to wake a teenager who's a very heavy sleeper. He has a difficult time waking even if he gets 8 or 9 hours of sleep. It's telling to me that this is a teenager because I think there's a couple of issues. One is, if your teenager is getting 8 or 9 hours of sleep on average, that's one thing. But many teenagers aren't able to do this. And not to get on my hobby horse, but school really does start too early for teenagers. So I would say that if your child is consistently getting enough sleep at night and still can't get out of bed in the morning, if they snore, they certainly should be evaluated for something like obstructive sleep apnea, which can make their sleep not high enough quality. And the other thing is, biologically, it's hard to get teenagers up in the morning. They want to sleep from midnight to 9. And if they do that, they're usually pretty easy to get up. But if you're trying to get them up earlier, that you're going against their body clock, and it's a struggle. So I have another question from Lindsay, actually, about sensory processing disorder. And there are a couple of questions about this. For those of you not familiar with this, sensory processing disorder is an issue where children have difficulties managing sensory input. And it can be in any domain. But usually we think of sensory issues being around oral or feeding problems, like children that gag on soft, mushy foods, such as myself, because I don't like mushy vegetables and they make me gag. But in all seriousness, some kids with feeding issues have difficulty tolerating certain consistencies. There are also kids that have trouble with loud noises or need loud noise, and most commonly in the sleep domain with sensory issues. Lindsay writes about sleep strategies for a kid with a sensory disorder beyond the usual weighted blanket, sensory diet during the day, etc. I do think those daytime interventions are pretty important, and it sounds like you already have an occupational therapist. I prefer actually Lycra sheets to weighted blankets. Weighted blankets are really heavy and they're uncomfortable during the summertime. They're also very expensive. A Lycra stocking for your bed works really well. And what you do is it's like a sock that you slide over your kid's bed. They slip down into it. And you can actually pack stuffed animals around their body if your child is that sensation seeking when they want to be wrapped up really tightly. There's an Etsy storefront called Cozy, COHSY, Comforts. It's actually the mom of one of my patients makes these because she's had a lot of luck with her son. And on Amazon, there's something called a Snug Bug you can purchase as well. So you can certainly try that out. Hold on, guys. You were super cool. A list of questions just disappeared. There's Facebook. Hey, Kevin. How are you, man? Good to see you. Okay. Question for Jen Olson. Starting sleep training. What to do when you're ready to start sleep training and your child starts teething or gets sick? I delayed starting because those top teeth look like they're just about ready to pop through, but it actually took 3 months. So in the end, they started a couple days later. The teething started to become more painful, and baby got a cold. So there's two questions: deciding when to start sleep training, even though teething might be a factor, and what to do when you start sleep training and something comes up. So I'd say the first thing is, if you're starting sleep training, first of all, make sure there's no major developmental issues on the horizon. If your child's about to start potty training, if your child's about to start walking, put it off for a couple of weeks. I wouldn't worry so much about the teething because those teeth buds, as you said, can linger. Make sure you have a couple of weeks of runway, and by that I mean weeks where you're not going anywhere, there's no major disruptions to the schedule, and less helpful in-laws aren't coming to visit. So just kind of plan that out a little bit. So here, let me see. Christine Patterson Moore, the universe is trying to tell me something. I see you here live the night I try to give in on my sleep training. Christine, we are all here for you. Stay the course, I promise you, and you are going to get there. It will happen. Question from Beth here. My daughter's 14 months and still waking once a night to nurse, and then for good between 5 and 6 in the morning. I don't know how to wean her. She goes nuts if I try to calm her without nursing. I'm a single mom, so I can't hand her off to anyone else for comfort. Any advice? I'm dying for a full night's sleep. Beth, I feel your pain, and I think especially single parents struggle with this because, and even if you're not single, some of the parents out there struggle with this as well because only one of you can nurse, typically. I think that I have a couple of thoughts. One is you have to think about when you're ready to wean altogether. If you are a parent that works outside of the home, nursing at night may be the only time that you're nursing. So if you wean those night feedings, it may be the end of your nursing. And that's totally fine. But it's really up to you when you're ready to do that. I think because Beth is kind of alluding to the fact that if there's two parents in the house, we'll often have the non-nursing parent be the one who takes over these feedings. I think the 5 or 6 a.m. awakening you're kind of stuck with, but I think you want to think about when you're ready to stop nursing, it may be time to do that. And there's no magic way to do it. You just kind of have to stop. Someone here is suggesting a sleep sack made of pure amber. That is one of my college roommates. Oh, good to see you, Julian. How do you handle night awakenings when they happen? My 19-month-old and 3-year-old fall asleep independently, but both wake up at night and won't go back to sleep till I come in and check on them. Interesting. I wonder if they wake up at the same time and if they're in the same room. If that's the case, there may be one child that's driving both of these awakenings. If kids are really falling asleep independently at night and they are waking up, my first thought is always, well, is there a medical issue that could be waking them up at night? The most common in my world is obstructive sleep apnea. So if your child snores, I might have them get checked out by their doctor. If they're complaining about leg pain, they could have a disorder called restless leg syndrome, which is a problem where you have a lot of kicking, leg restlessness, and leg discomfort. It occurs in about 1% of kids. And 1% doesn't sound like a lot, but most kids don't have any medical problems, so that's fairly common. So I think that I'd sort of look into, make sure you're not missing any medical cause. You probably aren't. Most kids are healthy. And then just sort of see about how you can peel back those interventions. And really what you want to do is do the minimum intervention you can. If they're sharing a room, think about separating them so one child does not wake up the other. And a check at night should be, I love you, go to sleep, good night, put them back to bed, and leave the room. So let's keep going here. Kitty writes, my 17-month-old falls asleep while being rocked to sleep, but will only stay to sleep 2 to 3 hours tops before crying for mama and daddy. She refuses to go back to sleep in her own crib the second time around, so she ends up in the bed with us. Help. Katie, many of us have been there, and I feel you. Again, this is a sleep onset association. If you work on the independent sleep and peeling yourself out at bedtime, that's going to get rid of those nighttime awakenings. Save your energy for bedtime. On my website, I have a whole bunch of stuff on different ways to sleep training, whatever your parenting philosophy is, and then the nighttime awakening should drop out. So Taryn's writing, an 18-month-old daughter, a month now of waking a couple times a night, takes an hour to get her to fall asleep. Is it a regression? Is it a leap? Do we wait it out as we had before? Try sleep training now. We've been weak trying it previously. She was sleeping through. The heartbreak of when your child is sleeping well at night and all of a sudden they're not anymore. It's a huge bummer, Taryn, and I've got you. I have a couple of thoughts. I'm not crazy about the term sleep regression because I feel like it implies that kids are going back, and it feels that way as a parent. But really, if it's a change in the sleep pattern associated with a major developmental milestone, I think of it as a step forward. I think that again, if I'm sorry, let me just look through your question. I'd work on having her fall asleep independently. I would look to see, if it's been going on recently. Could she have an ear infection or something like that? Again, children falling asleep on their own and waking up frequently at night, I think your first stop should be your pediatrician. If she's not falling asleep independently, then I would work on that. I think you should certainly wait a couple of days and see where that gets you. And maybe you don't have to make any changes. Okay, so Brittany writes, how do we wean a 7-month-old from multiple sleep association at once or in stages? I love these questions, guys. Our son needs a bottle before bed, including naps, and a pacifier to fall asleep and stay asleep, all while rocking him. Without all of this, he will not go to sleep. He is unable to self-soothe, which we know is the main part of the problem, but how do we wean him from all those sleep associations at once without all hell breaking loose? And it does feel like hell when you're trying to deal with these issues. Sorry if I'm offending anyone. I would leave the binky as is for right now because it's pretty common for kids to have a pacifier. The falling asleep with the bottle, I might see if you can move that earlier in the bedtime sequence. So if your bedtime sequence is story, song, bottle, and rocking, I'd move the bottle earlier. Even if you could do it in a separate room and then just try rocking him to sleep. And once you've broken out that association, then work on getting rid of the rocking and putting him down when he's still awake. There may be some crying associated with that. At 7 months of age, it's difficult to avoid, but typically it shouldn't take more than a couple of days to get better. Then you can continue, again, with your middle of the night interventions to survive, and hopefully they're going to drop out with time. So Becky asks, sleep training for naps only first. For 6 months of sleep deprivation, I broke down and started co-sleeping and nursing all night long with her 8-month-old. So many bad habits to break, and we have a critically ill mother-in-law. Not a good time to sleep train. I agree with you, and I think that self-care is an important part of any of these conversations, right? Like, as parents, we need to decide, do we deal with mom who's in the hospital? Do we deal with baby? I haven't gotten a ton of mileage with sleep training during the day, and the reason is kids really aren't that sleepy at nap times when you think about compared with wake time, right? Like at bedtime, they've been awake for most of the day except for some short sleep periods, whereas naps, they're less tired. I can tell you, Becky, when your child gets a little bit older, the naps will get better. Once your child is walking, that was my experience. My older son struggled with naps until he could walk, and then it fell into place. I mean, I think that I would think about what are the small incremental changes you can do. Where would I start? I think you have to start with where you're comfortable. I think that obviously your child is less than a year. I wouldn't start weaning the breast. I would just, again, work on getting your bedtime perfect. Work on removing your involvement in your child's bedtime, and then do what you need to in the middle of the night. Your bedtime is your maximum point of energy and strength to deal with these things. So again, if you can kind of step back a little bit from your nursing the child, if your partner could do bedtime and you could step out, even go for a walk for an hour or something, just work on the bedtime, give yourself a break the rest of the time. Michelle writes about swing weaning. I have a 13-month-old who loves her swing. Every night we start in the crib, but she wakes up wanting her swing. If I keep her in the crib, she's up for hours. If I put the swing in, she's back asleep within minutes and sleep through the night. When do you swing wean? First of all, Michelle, my older son loved his swing. I'm guessing this is your first child, because if you have a second child, there's no way you're leaving them swing for periods of time, because the older child's going to come and knock them out of it. I mean, let's be real here. I have two boys. I think that it's going to happen sooner or later, no matter what, because your kid is just going to get too big for the swing. I would again peel away the swing at bedtime. Do what you need to just arrive in the middle of the night. Just make sure your kid is safe in the swing, because a 13-month-old is probably getting close to exceeding the tolerances for this device. Kay writes, for a child with autism, the preschool age, delayed sleep onset, and early morning awakenings, what is the best first step in addressing the sleep concerns? Kay, I think a couple of things. First of all, Beth Malow, M-A-L-O-W, wrote a terrific book on dealing with sleep problems in autistic children. It's written for parents. Dr. Malow is a professor at Vanderbilt School of Medicine, a child neurologist, but she also has 2 daughters with autism, so she walks the walk. And I would check out that book. Again, you're going to detect a theme here. Get your bedtime just down. Kids with autism will really work well with a visual schedule. So if you actually just draw it with stick figures, or take pictures of your children doing the things that you want them to do every night at bedtime. Every kid loves this, and I find that works really well with kids with autism. The other thing is, if you talk to your pediatrician or who you're working with autism, there may be a role for a medication like melatonin. I'm not the person to tell you if it's the right thing to do or not, but I talk about it with your pediatrician. But there's no reason that a child with autism can't sleep better than what you're describing right now. Though it is true that some of my autistic patients do seem to need a little bit less sleep than their peers. So also accepting the early morning awakenings, 5 to 6, and a slightly later bedtime, it may be meeting your child's sleep needs. But good luck. It can be challenging, certainly. Natasha, 12-month-old puts herself to sleep but wakes once a night for a feed. Will she ever sleep to herself by herself, or will I have to night wean? I mean, eventually she'll give up the night wean, the night feeding. I mean, it's going to happen. So you could either wait for that. I don't suspect the next couple of months she's going to raise her hand and say, okay, Mom, I'm done with this. So if you want it to stop, you're probably going to need to stop it. And the way to do that is if you have if there's another family member in the house to take care of that awakenings, a couple of nights, it should be done. But again, just recognize if you're not doing a lot of nursing sessions anymore, you're at risk of weaning altogether. That may be desirable for you. Don't let anyone make you feel bad about weaning, but it can happen. Katie writes, good Lord, my 2-year-old has decided to resist getting in bed for his nap every day. Then he naps for 2 hours. It's just a fight. We did sleep training. He's in a twin bed. Do we keep pushing forward and insisting nap, even though it's very frustrating? Oh, you're welcome, Becky. And hey, Teresa. Katie, there's a study a couple of years ago that was looking at napping looking at napping in kids with sleep problems at night. And what they found is that a certain subset of kids after age 2, napping messes up their sleep at night. And as painful, and I'm a parent, as painful as it is to imagine giving up that nap, you might try not having the nap for a week and doing an earlier bedtime and seeing if that makes your life better. The thing is about these nap transitions, they kind of stink, right? You're going to have a period of time where your child is cranky and irritable during the day. It's never a picnic when they give it the nap. It's not like they just give it up when they're ready. But I would try that and see. Michelle, I'm going to post, you asked me the question about the swing and I just talked about it. Long story short, I'd say work on getting into the swing at bedtime, but I have a more detailed answer in the replay that I'm going to do. And I feel you, sister, because my older kid loved the swing as well. Terrence's question, stick at the same bedtime or would start earlier or delay since it takes an hour to fall asleep. If your child you put your child to bed at 7:30 and they fall asleep at 8:30, then I would just move the bedtime to 8:30. I promise you it's going to go more easily. Let's see. How do you handle bedtime for a kid who's overtired after daycare? This is a question from Kelly. Actually, this is really timely because I want to talk to you guys a little bit about this. Let me see if I can make these slides pop up for you. Sorry. So some kids just aren't ready for bed at bedtime. I'm going to see what happens if if I actually hit play on this, and it'll actually show. Yeah, I think I'm showing you the screen here. So, your kids, there's this phenomenon called the dim light melatonin onset. And we all know melatonin because it's in the news and people take it to help them fall asleep. Maybe you've tried it. The melatonin is made naturally in your brain. And what it does is it's the signal to your body to say, hey, dude, it's time to go to sleep. So it's going to get started secreted about an hour before you go to bed. Some kids, a sleep scientist named Monique Laure-Bourgeois figured this out, that kids who had problems falling asleep actually had bedtime too early relative to their dim light melatonin onset. So, a later bedtime is associated with more sleep drive. So this is just showing the sleep drive. The longer you're awake, the more tired you are, right? It totally makes sense that if you're awake I was a resident one time, you're awake for 36 hours, you're super tired. But there's another thing you need to consider. Well, I'm just going to mention late naps in passing, which can wreak havoc with these things. But there's something called the forbidden zone. And this term, I believe, was coined by Dr. Ferber. And it's an interesting idea. So, in general, the later your child is awake, the more sleepy they'll be. But you have a natural system to counteract this natural tendency to fall asleep as it gets later and later. It's called a wakefulness drive, and it peaks after dinner. So it looks a little bit like this. So essentially, and this is your body clock sending a wakefulness signal. So we don't want to just fall asleep every 15 minutes between lunch and bedtime. So if you look right here, you get this little burst of activity, energy right there. It's the forbidden zone. So if your child is, and we've all seen this, if you've ever had to keep your kids up a little bit late for a special occasion and they're acting nuts and won't go to bed, you're in the forbidden zone. So I think if you find that consistently your child is overtired and acting crazy around bedtime, you can either try bedtime that's a half hour earlier or a half hour later. And then you should get a little bit more mileage from that. So, I'm going to go back to the video. Hope that worked okay. Colleen, our 21-year-old with me put himself to sleep for bedtime and nap time but still won't sleep through the night. We tried to let him cry back to sleep and it just won't work. For example, he woke at 12:30 and cried for over an hour. We get quiet for a few minutes and start crying all over again. My husband ends up holding him in a recliner and he'll stop crying. So he wakes up at least one, usually 2 times, and up again at 6, always crying, but can't go back to sleep. His bedtime is at 8. He falls asleep by 8:30 or 9. Any tips? I'm just looking at these numbers here. Colleen, I would shorten your bedtime ritual and I'd shoot for lights out at 9 because he's falling asleep at 9. But I agree with you, it's a little bit weird if he's falling asleep on his own and not, and waking up during the night. I do wonder if there's a little bit of a habit formation here because there's nothing more reinforcing for a kid than contact and attention from mom or dad. I would try to have dad kind of minimize the involvement he's doing. At night, just sort of say, I love you, go to sleep, good night, pat him on the back and leave. If you have to go in the room a couple of times, that's okay. But I try the later bedtime first. And then again, if there's issues like snoring or anything else like that, I would have him checked out by your pediatrician to make sure there's not a medical issue. There probably isn't, but medical issues like sleep apnea are common if your child snores, for example, and could be disrupting your child's sleep. So I would check that So guys, we are heading in the home strip here. I'm just trying to stop my computer from doing other weird stuff that's on a timer. Let's see. How should extended night wakings be handled by parents of a 3-year-old? Melissa, I would say that if your kid's really having extended wake times every night, the one thing I'd look at is actually a later bedtime, because it sounds like you may have 2 distinct chunks of sleep during the night, and you want to push them together. So try bedtime 30 or 45 minutes later and see if that gets you where you need to go. Any recommendations for a preschool who has nighttime wakings and can't fall back asleep alone because she's scared? Man, that was, that can be challenging. And I think that one of the things that's really helpful with the nighttime fears is there's the things you can do called flashlight scavenger hunts. And what you do is you have your child, spend a little bit of time in the room by themselves during the day when you're right outside and set up a little scavenger hunt for them in the dark and give them a flashlight. Encourage them to do this just for very short periods and make a game of it during the day. That can help with the nighttime fears. So Natasha, following your question, I tried night weaning several times. My daughter's a real screamer. She cried loudly for 3 hours. Natasha, I think your child is around 14 or 15 months. As I said, I don't think there's any real quick fix here in your situation. I think that at a certain point, you either have to make your peace with nursing once or twice a night, or you're just going to have to stop. And after a couple of nights, it would go away. But I feel the pain that will entail. I know it's not something that's to be undertaken trivially. Let's see. Deneen, 8 and 10-year-olds share the bedroom and keep each other awake. 10-year-old has ADHD. Certainly a similar situation to what we had before. I think that for this age group especially, incenting good behavior, being like, if you guys, if you guys are quiet and go to sleep on time, we're going to actually, give you some small rewards for this. There's actually a great book by Alan Kazdin, Kazdin. He's actually at Yale as well. And it's called Parenting the Difficult Child, but don't be put off by the title. It's all about how to use positive reinforcement and rewards, which are going to work very well for 8 and 10-year-olds. Lauren asked about how you know when a breastfed baby is night weaning, it's not a specific age. I mean, honestly, I think the night weaning comes down more to when mom's ready to wean and not when the child's ready to wean. Honestly, I think that don't get me wrong, breast is best. I don't want to come across like I'm anti-breastfeeding, but if you're ready to wean, it's okay to wean. What are some recommendations to deal with sleep regressions after ear infections or illnesses? I would say do what worked before. High quality bedtime, consistency, things will get better pretty quickly. So, Steve-O, how to manage a 15-month-old who wakes every half an hour crying and clings to the breast 24/7. Steve-O, I would say, in all seriousness, send your wife away for a couple of nights, and this will get better. Get her a nice hotel room, send her with her friends. She can bring her pump and keep pumping so she doesn't lose her milk supply. It's not going to, the only way to kind of cure the situation is to have a parent, besides the nursing mom, do more of the care. And I'm sure you're super involved because you're asking the question here. And finally, the last question I saw is from Maria. How to remove the midnight milk bottles for a 3-year-old. Again, it's not always just nursing. I look at the volume of milk that the child is taking in because this is a calorie problem. If your child is consistently taking, if you're consistently eating an ice cream sundae in the middle of the night, at midnight, then I'm going to, then you're going to wake up if I take it away. So you want to take the bottle, say it's 5 ounces, the next night it's 4 ounces, the next night it's 3 ounces, you get down to 2 ounces, then you substitute water, and that's the end of it. So this is the last question I'm going to take, guys. And these questions have been awesome. We'll definitely do this again. Our 6-year-old daughter was adopted from a trauma background. She just started sleeping the other night in her own bed, which is wonderful. Thank you for the compliment. Always want to sleep in her own bed, wake at all hours of the night, and sneak into our bed to feel safe. In the summer, we started taking turns on a cot in her room. Liz, I think in this situation, the normal rules don't really apply. If you have a child with a history of trauma, I'm sure you're already hooked into some services. The most important thing is making sure your child feels secure. And if that means you sleeping for a temporary period of time in her room, or you having a safe place on your floor where your child can come in and sleep, either way is fine. You don't have to rush this. And it sounds like if you've worked really hard to get her in her own bed, just have a comfortable place for you to sleep. And I'd say even if I'd be very clear, you're like, if you put her to sleep in a room and you're like, I'm going to be sleeping in my room, just follow through on what you're saying. And sometimes what works well is saying, well, if you wake up in the middle of the night, I've set up a bed in my room, you can just come in and go to sleep. But in your situation, first of all, one of the thing you've done adopting a child, and my friend Julian, who was on earlier, is an adoption specialist, who's awesome if you're in the Seattle area. But, just make your child feel safe and everything's going to get better. Colleen, okay, and Liz is doing some stuff. Let's see, in kindergarten, no naps and booms, a couple times she's awake and go back into sleep. Wow, this is wonderful stuff. Yeah, Michelle is reinforcing. Steve-O, send your wife away. You're going to look like a superhero. Liz wrote, I have a 15-month-old and a grandma just babysat for 3 days. I went away. It was a huge difference when I returned. Wonderful. What a supportive partner you have, Melissa. Colleen, quick follow-up question. Routine about 10 minutes at 7:50, then lights out. He talks to himself and whines till about 8:30 or 9. Stop pulmonologist. She didn't do any testing because he's healthy. Otherwise, we didn't know snoring. I think later is okay because lights out and he talks to himself. I think with the nighttime awakening, I still think a shorter period in bed might be helpful. And I'm glad to hear there's no health issues. So guys, this has been great. Thank you so much for their questions. They were totally awesome. And, just to put this out there, I'm actually just signed a contract, working on a book, incorporating a lot of the stuff that I've learned from you guys, which will be coming out on Christmas of 2018. So anyway, thank you so much for your attention. I'm going to post a replay of this on the website and my blog. And absolutely terrific, the question engagement. Thank you so much.